All right, welcome back to Just Another Solar Podcast with Luke Beattie. That's me, Karl Jensen. G'day, Karl.
Luke, how have you been this week?
I've been good, thanks, mate. And Nigel Morris. How are you, Nige?
I'm good, thanks, mate. You can call me the locomotive. There's been so much wheeling and dealing. That's what I got called today.
I noticed that Karl had a big week. I saw him, he took off to Queensland for just a single day.
Yeah, I had did a video with Mark Kavanagh from MC Electrical, so it's a bit of a plug there. Mark thought that the economics for a heat pump was marginal in Queensland. Certainly it's a piece of cake to justify a heat pump economically versus any other solution in Victoria. But Queensland, he thought he had a case, but turns out when you run the numbers, he doesn't. Heat pumps still win. So that was a great day, and I learned a lot about the MC Electrical business that I didn't know before. And Mark is really enjoying making his little videos and growing his brand and his image out there as an influencer, which is great.
I mean, he's been doing that longer than most successfully too. So full respect to Mark.
Yeah, I'm just lucky that I wasn't the on the receiving end of the usual hammering that he dishes out.
Yep. And Nigel, I've seen you all over socials again. There's a new channel that's come out, and I've seen that you're the solar guru.
Yeah, for a big shout out to Marcus Lambert, who lots of us know, who has this week launched a brand new channel called Your Energy Answers. And he's sort of, after he left LG, after more than a decade there, trying to build, I guess, a story about quality solar. He spent the last couple of years building out his next empire, if you like, which is a marketing agency. And it's kind of got two prongs. One is a big educational component to get information for consumers about how to choose quality solar, big focus on local installers, big focus on no cricketers. And he's got multiple channels running throughout that and different bits of information about appliances and solar and various other things. And I managed to, jemmy my foot in the door there and do some stuff which he's very kindly created a channel called the Solar Guru channel, which is actually really cool, because what happens is people go to their website and they literally write questions about solar. What happens if there's a storm and my solar panels get hail damaged, and I have to try and answer the question in 15 seconds. So there's a whole bunch of content that's gone out now to answer all those typical questions. That's the goal for them to help educate consumers, which benefits us all. And then the other part of his business is a marketing and media business designed to help solar installers, which I also think is really, really cool. So yeah, I
like the delivery of the content. It's sort of TikTok style videos. You've got the customer asking the question to the camera. The production's excellent, but it's easily digestible, short and sharp. Yeah.
Yeah, they've kind of landed at a great time in the industry, because they've come in and they knew they wanted to do a big focus on video, and his business partner is a legendary guy called Leonard C, who's got an amazing studio and amazing capabilities, and they've got a team of people doing graphics and various other bits and pieces. But what they really recognised from the get-go was that they needed to have short-form content that was suitable for Reels and TikTok and everything else, and they needed some long-term content that was going to suit a nerd who really wanted to sit down for half an hour and hear about how Rami first got into solar and some of the other great stories that are on there. So, there's a real interesting mix of content. So, look them up. Your Energy Answers.
One of the other people on there is a guest today. I saw Rami Fedda from Solar Juice on there talking about how he started, I think, on a production line back in the late 90s. So, g'day, Rami Fedda from Solar Juice. How are you, Rami?
Fantastic, Luke. Thanks for having me. And feel honoured to be on this show.
Do you want to give a quick summary of that for the people who haven't seen it? So you started in the 1990s at a solar panel manufacturer.
Yeah, straight out of school. Back in 97, I worked on both the cell production line and the solar panel production line. Yeah, versus today, if you visit any plant in China or Europe, as to how we were producing panels back then, or even solar cells.
So it was a lot more manual handling as opposed to automated stuff?
Oh, my God, Rami. I remember that Solar X factory. Holy moly, mate. You were lucky if you got out the other side without some kind of weird poison.
Yeah, I got some more wounds. So it was very, very manual. I mean, even the hazardous steps where we're dipping the wafers in different acid baths, I was doing that by hand, basically. So moving that from one process step to the other, and even filling the baths as well with acid. So literally just pouring a bottle inside one of the carriers for that production step. And I think I lost a bit of my ear. So from working on that, the very, very manual production line. Versus today, I mean, I just came back from China and visited Trina's panel line. And I was very surprised to see that it's very, very automated. There's very, very minimal human intervention, hardly any labor versus what we saw on a probably 4 megawatt panel line or even 2 megawatt panel line. The first two steps, you probably saw about 40 bodies on the production floor. Now you see probably one engineer that's pumping out 50 megawatts.
Unreal.
Yeah, massive shift.
Yeah, I remember back in the day, Luke, you and I had both been to the REC factory, and their original scenario was, or their claim to fame was, that they were the most automated factory in the world. And at the time, they were making 750 megawatts and they had about 1,100 staff. Rami's story, that's not looking too good these days.
Just to put in perspective, the most simple step, right, is when a panel's finished and moving it from the final step to the actual insert it to the carton box or onto a pallet. It's a robot. There's no humans there. Purely just robots.
No young guys dipping things by hand into acid baths.
Yes.
Everyone gets to keep their ears.
Yeah, and I think I was about 18 at the time, and this was a night shift, right? So there was hardly anybody else around. So, and the acid fumes, and every now and again there'll be some sort of issue. There'll be some sort of alarm going off, and I would have to go outside on water on the massive hydrogen cylinder. For whatever reason, that's caused the whole plant to stop. So we'd have to manually pour water over it to get the line back up and running.
Wow.
So,
well, they've come a long way, man.
Yeah.
Because I got the H1 data for the module manufacturers, so their shipping. Jinko was at 31 gigawatts for the half year. Trina, 28 gigawatts. Longji, 28 gigawatts. And then JA Solar, 25 gigawatts. We've talked about it before on the podcast about how much the module manufacturing capacity has grown. What's your take on it, man? It just seems to be growing exponentially still.
Can I jump in and ask one there too, which is relative to this question that Luke's answered? Because we've talked about the oversupply, undersupply balance in the past as well. Where are we at? So, in that global scale of things, have we got oversupply or undersupply at the moment?
In terms of just panels, or are you talking about the whole value chain?
The whole value chain.
I'll say at the moment, it's not too bad, the balance. Maybe in some markets, they've been probably gotten a bit too excited and causing oversupply, for example, in Europe at the moment. We've seen articles where there's over 40 gigawatts of stock sitting in warehouses. This doesn't include panels on vessels, which they clearly indicated on the article that there was still a heap on the way. So that's where massive problems happen, where the price collapse in terms of panels. When a heap of panels are sitting in warehouses, people have all of a sudden cash flow issues and they start dumping it onto the market. We experienced that, I believe it was early to mid last year, where there was a bit of an oversupply and wholesalers were selling below costs. So in Australia at the moment, it's not due to the fact of oversupply that some people we're actually experiencing wholesalers selling below costs, but that's due to panel price fluctuation due to raw material pricing. Yes, pricing has collapsed in Australia, but it's not due to oversupply. It's purely due to new pricing that's available now out of the factory gate and people panicking, wanting to clear existing stock, making way for new priced panels.
Right. So we've got a local supply and demand issue here. Globally, you're saying you reckon it's kind of roughly in balance, but there's excess stock in Europe, which is likely potentially to flow into other countries, right?
Yeah, that coupled with what's happening in the US, where they're not accepting Chinese-made panels. And recently, there's rumors out there, I think it could be verified with some sort of article, that one of the big brands, US Customs rejected about 1.5 gigawatts So basically, they're sitting in warehouses on wharves, not allowed to be sold in the US. So they would have to be sold to other markets. My guess is they won't go to Europe, most likely Asia, and maybe some will end up here. But knowing the sizes, it's more the utility size and commercial panels. So Australia might be tough there unless there's some existing orders, but they'll be floating around in other markets. That's also creating excess stock. Yeah.
Right.
I've seen times where it was a lot worse in terms of panel oversupply. At the moment, I still feel in most markets, it's pretty well balanced.
Do you think that it shows the immaturity in our market? Because with other commodities and other products, if you get fluctuations in price, it sort of gets ramped. It doesn't move so suddenly. So an example is that, let's say the solar panel price goes up or goes down immediately. The way I look at it is as an importer of panels, as you are, and a wholesaler, at any given time, we've got around the same amount of stock. Let's say hypothetically there's a couple of months and it fluctuates. You might have more, you might have less. But if the price moves and the new stock's going to be landing in 2 months, then we're in a similar position. And the numbers might be different in terms of how many megawatts are on the shelf, but the amount of stock that you float would probably be similar. So a wholesaler would look at that and say, right, I'm guessing that we're all in the same boat. We're all going to get that price change at that particular time in a couple of months or whenever it is. But what we're seeing is knee-jerk reactions that they will move below cost. They will do silly things, even though it puts everyone else in a tough position. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, and to make things even more complicated, the footprint is changing super fast. So prior to 3 years ago, there was a shift in a module footprint technology probably once every couple of years. Now we're seeing it almost every quarter or two, right? So right now, yes, there might be some sort of panic around, for example, 415s. You can probably agree with me. At the moment, no one's making money on 415-watt panels. But it's a different sort of climate for the 430s, 440s, the TOPCon product. That seems to be a bit of a shortage there. But in that traditional P-type bread and butter product like a 415, to me, there is a surplus in the market. In what Luke's saying, correct. Everyone tries to hold a sort of min-max sort of level. And whenever it hits that max, above that max level, everyone starts panicking and quickly, like a knee-jerk reaction, and drops the price, hoping to get the inventory lower and, again, access new stock that people actually want.
How much 415 do you reckon's out there in people's warehouses?
Solar juice, I think the only 415s we have is these Tongways, where I'm comfortable saying everyone's making a loss on them at the moment. We sort of saw it where the TOPCon product was in flavour. So we turned the tap off on the 415s. For example, trainers, we have very little. Most of the trainers that we have, 90% are the TOPCon range. But I believe others have a massive issue with the 415s.
Which is a shame, right? Because only 12 months ago, a 400 was as good as you could buy. It was a premium you had to spend to get a 400 over a 390.
And what's driving that, right, is that 6.6, what do you call it?
It's a crazy mental 5 kilowatt barrier.
A lot of the guys are still sort of fixed to be mapping panels into that footprint. But now with battery storage, I feel that people want to whack as many watts as possible on a roof. And when people are buying batteries, trying to save money on maximizing SDCs isn't the priority. It's about getting as much wattage on a roof. That's my interpretation.
Warwick published some data this week talking about the fact that the average system size has gone up again. I think it's up like
9.5 or something.
Yeah, almost 10 kilowatts now. So finally, consumers are really starting to listen and going, just fill your roof. Just fill your roof. Put as much as you possibly can on the roof.
Nigel, you got Saul Griffith telling us that the magic number is 34 kilowatt hours a day. So to get that in Melbourne, you need 27 kilowatts on the roof, mate. It's still not 9. It's 27.
On this topic of manufacturers, Rami, there was also some info that came out recently about PV manufacturer profitability, which was kind of interesting. I took it with a grain of salt, but I did grab the data and kind of do a couple of quick calculations and go, what does that actually mean? And, between When you look at the gross profit that PV manufacturers are making on that Fortune China post, but just looking at it in terms of the percentages, the range was extraordinary. So, there's how many on the list? There's 13 on the list, and the range of gross profit percent at the lowest, 1% gross profit. At the highest, what have we got? 45%. And there was a bunch that was sort of 2s, 3s, 4s, 5s. Now, I'd be really interested in your take on this, because you mentioned off air that this is just an early snapshot of profitability, and of course that changes over the course of a year and whatnot, and there are seasons and everything else. And there are other influences, because some are polysilicon upstream players, and Sungrow was listed on there, for example. They're an inverter manufacturer, and then some are sort of more downstream module manufacturers. But it's a massive range of profit. Overall, how would you say the health is in terms of gross profit across the manufacturers?
Well, the good news is everyone's making money. No one's losing, right?
That's true. It's all positive.
But if you get the top 5 polysilicon manufacturers, you'll see clearly the same, whoever's on top of that standing or listing is on top of the profitability list as well, right? So Tongwei is the largest polysilicon manufacturer. At the same time, they are the largest solar cell manufacturer as well. But it's an easy bet. Majority of that profitability is due to polysilicon. That could drastically change the second half of the year, because polysilicon pricing at the start of this year or end of last year was well above $30. It was closer to 38. And the last 4 weeks or so, it's tracking around $9.
Wow.
So, yeah, that's a crack drop.
How long does that take to come downstream to modules?
These figures were generated probably late July, so they're fairly fresh. What they're saying here is, from year to date, polysilicon's dropped about 67%. So it's flowed down to wafers. And with the wafer sizes, it varies quite a bit. But on average, they've dropped around 20 and 55% on the solar wafers. And that's why you saw LONGi as number 2. They don't produce polysilicon, right? But they're the largest wafer manufacturer. Again, I mean, their figures won't be as attractive second half of the year due to the fact the profitability for wafers has dropped massively as well. Cells, it's about 10% drop year to date, but panels is 30% drop. So my guess is guys who are producing, especially the TOPCon cells, were either not making as much money as before, but now I think they'll be making quite a bit of money, because you can see there that the cell price has been
raw material cost
much.
is going down, right?
Yeah. But the panel manufacturers did cop a 30% hit. Yeah, wafers and poly has taken the major grunt there. But that's where the profit was, right? It was sitting on the wafer and in the polysilicon level.
Right upstream. Yeah.
And if you see someone like a pure play solar company that's just producing panels, I mean, we know that the largest manufacturer was Jinko, and you can, on that same profitability table that you were looking at, without you telling me, my guess is that 1% was Jinko, right? without looking at the percentages.
That's right. That's right. But I think, if I'm not mistaken, Rami, the takeaway from you on that table is take it with a pinch of salt, because it's a snapshot in time. And, while profits might appear to be high in some segments and low in other segments, it's only a snapshot in time, and it all sort of has a trickle down effect. And so, if you do that, so if you look at that same profitability table, in another 1 or 2 quarters time, when we've had time for all those price reductions to flow through, it could look completely different, right? But ultimately, as you said, the fantastic news there, they're all making money.
I think in the past, the wafer manufacturers and polysilicon manufacturers were controlling the market. So they were able to hold, they had an edge versus the other manufacturers. But I think moving forward, they'll have less exposure. For example, we sat on one of Trina's annual presentation, which they held at SNEC. So the founder was talking about their future plans. They're ramping up a lot on wafering. Where there was a massive mismatch, where, for argument's sake, they had 100 gigawatts of capacity on the panels and probably 80 on the cells, but only 20 on the wafers, right? Now it's going to be a lot more balanced. So it's going to be more vertically integrated.
But there's a trend towards that. So you mentioned Tongwei, you mentioned LONGi. There's a number of other ones. I mean, it's not new. GCL did the same thing as a wafer cell manufacturer, went to modules.
I know exactly what you're saying, but this is in the reverse. And because Tongwei are seeing that, and obviously they officially moved up to panels only last year. Right. But yeah, what you're saying is very true. GCL, LDK.
The interesting one I saw was Meyer Burger. So they've traditionally built the machines and the processes. I believe that they came up with the IP and all the machines for the heterojunction cells, even the alpha pure ones. And my understanding is that REC procured that IP from them. But Meyer Burger now is doing modules. So they've gone from being an equipment and process manufacturer to coming all the way down the chain and coming to market with modules.
I mean, me and Nigel were probably dealing with Meyer Burger, probably indirectly for many years with the first machine that I remember that produced silicon nitride technology was from Rough and Rao. Rough and Rao was bought by Meyer Burger. And they also bought the biggest cell printing machinery companies like Pacini, which BP were also using. So yeah, Meyer Burger was the biggest equipment manufacturer for cells and panels, but eventually the Chinese were able to produce their own machinery. Not the Jinkos and Neutrinos, it's other equipment manufacturers were able to build the equivalent machinery a lot cheaper.
Yep.
So now there's even manufacturers out there out of China that can produce HJT technology. So you'll probably see that in the next few years.
What other trends? Where are they going? I mean, you're right across we've got TOPCon in market, lots of N-type dual glass. We've got P-type seems to be fading away and the roadmap is all towards N-type. What else is coming? What do you see as being the most mainstream?
The only thing that can trump TOPCon will be HJT. There's nothing else in the short term that can exceed it on efficiency and can get to the same pricing levels.
Listen, just hold on. Yeah. You bloody solar nerds. For those guys out there who don't live in this weird world that you do with HJTs and TOPCons, what does that mean? Top connectors. Is it top connectors?
I know HJT is heterojunction.
So TOPCon's one step in the process that helps leverage some more power or some more performance out of the panel.
It's to help produce cells using N-type wafers, right?
Okay, so it's something particular to N-type. Okay, great. And what's HJT? What's HJT?
Also an N-type technology as well.
Okay, but heterojunction. So that's about I'm testing my science here, but that's about improving the performance of the grain boundaries within the wafer structure so that the energy can flow between the grain boundaries better. Is that right?
HJT is a multi-layer panel. So got a thin film or a film layer of some description over the top of the cell. So we've seen multi-layer panels before with Panasonic and Sanyo. Yep. The latest evolution of that is the HJT. And I believe the TOPCon is a multi-layer panel as well. And it's just a matter of the different methods that different manufacturers are using and therefore the different process that they're calling it, i.e. TOPCon and HJT are both multi-layer technologies.
Right. Which, trying to wrap this very nerdy conversation up about PV technology up, what's really cool, especially with our guest here, I remember when we got our first plasma arc deposition machine back at Homebush, which was the super duper latest stuff. And, this really ridiculously complex machine that introduced a plasma arc and all the whole thing basically had the effect of making it easier for energy to flow around inside the cell. And there were all sorts of technologies that you can use to do that. And it just keeps continuing, right? And now we've got to the point where we've got layers of different materials in full scale production from these kinds of things, blending different technologies, different techniques to get the energy flowing more efficiently within the cell. That all just means you get more watts per square watt at a lower cost. And
we're just fractionally under 22% efficiency, which is just nuts. That's awesome.
Now, Rami, you've come from manufacturing modules. Some of the conversations we've had on the podcast and conversations around trade shows has been coming back to Australian manufacturing. Obviously, the Tindo's been in market for a while. There's another player, SunDrive, who are pushing quite hard to get some federal government support and some program to bring manufacturing here. They're using copper in cells as opposed to silver, and they've got a few other unique things they're doing. How viable is it for us to get the module manufacturing up to scale in Australia, and what are the real challenges as you see it?
Module manufacturing, it's not completely simple, but it's not so hard to introduce to Australia. But the biggest hurdle I see, you probably need two factories, panel factories, one on the East Coast, one on the West Coast, because you'll get smashed with the transport costs. The other thing is, I believe Sun-Driven's also talking about cell manufacturing, not just panel manufacturing, right? That's what you're talking about with the copper. And I think the reasoning behind that would be the biggest cost for HJT would be the silver. And my understanding is the silver component is double the usage versus P-type. From P-type, I think it's around 10 grams. Topcon uses about 13 grams of silver. HJT uses above 20 grams. In the past, we've heard about copper. I remember reading in my younger days that Suntech in the early 2000s with that Pluto technology was supposedly using copper, but there was some issues there. Whether or not they can overcome those issues with HJT, I'm not sure if it's even proven on the lab level. I haven't seen anything around that. Whether module manufacturing and cell manufacturing can work in Australia. If labour is the big component that we're worried about, as I said, now there's turnkey equipment. If you buy them off the shelf, there's very little bodies are required in terms of labour, but it does require a higher skill set. So there's definitely more engineers on a production line, on a cell and panel line versus a normal factory.
And I suppose you've got to back the right technology too.
Yeah, that's the other big thing, right? We've seen so many shifts. I briefly spoke to one of the guys at Sun-Driven and just said, just be careful on when to step in. My advice would be start with panels because it's the capital investment is a lot less. And if you want to run a cell line with HJT, start very, very small. Import the cells from a factory in Asia to begin with, but produce the panels in Australia. So there is, a lot of Australian content there. But as you said, if you pick the wrong technology, and we have seen it, right? If you're stuck with 370s, and 370s were only made, less than 2 years ago, you would have to sell it well below cost versus the bread and butter product now, which is a 440. For someone to consider a 370, even if it's made in Australia, it would have to be cheaper than a product coming out of China. That's just my opinion. I mean, we saw with REC that they've dropped prices dramatically the past 6 months because product wasn't moving. And when they reduced the price, they got a lot closer to the Chinese product. I'm talking about with the 400 watt, it finally did move. We did start seeing some traction. Yeah, if you back the wrong technology and you can't just look at a 6 month window, it needs to be, if you're investing in a production line, you're looking at a good 4 years to get your money back.
So it'd be tough. I mean, it needs to have some sort of leg up then to succeed in the near term.
Yeah. And I've also heard there's a few others looking at producing panels, purely panels in Australia, whether they've started or not. So there's more than just two guys out there. And whenever I visit overseas, they always ask the question, what do you think? Or they actually already have done their homework. They've got guys out here researching where to set up the production plant. So just to have that Australian-made angle, if you're the sole manufacturer like Tinder is at the moment, it might work at this point in time. But if there's 3 or 4 out there producing panels, it's going to be a hard slog trying to sell Australian-made panels if you don't have the right technology, especially.
Rami, we want a factory in Darwin, mate, right next to where we're going to put in 40 gigawatts for sun cable. That's the logical choice, surely. Domestic, fiercely competitive.
Is that project still happening?
It's been split up into a couple of different pieces. Why anyone would have wanted to proceed with that project with the risk of building the solar farm, the cable, and the battery scenario. There's 3 big projects there on their own. It made a lot more sense to build one of those projects, not all 3. Obviously, you need 2 of them, the cable and the panel. So it didn't make any sense to me to put the battery storage in there in the first place. So I believe that it's going to go ahead without the battery, which is where it should have been in the first place.
Did you guys hear about the Brookfield project with Reliance? They're looking at, something like a $30 billion investment into solar manufacturing and hydrogen.
Wow, to drive hydrogen.
So there's lots of talk. And there was an MOU signed as well. So yeah lots of things happening.
Lots of talk.
Whether or not who's going to pull the trigger first, right?
That's right. And go back to Sun Cable. I mean, they bought a thin film manufacturer. They bought a technology. So Twiggy had, who was an original investor, he's out now, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, he is. He's out. But Twiggy, as part of his investment in that project, went, yeah, I'll buy a manufacturer, and bought a whole entire manufacturing facility out of Europe, who specialized in what looked to me like a redundant thin film technology, weirdly. But, he's got so much demand that he can just feed panels in to feed his mines and facilities around the country. And if he's getting cheap panels, then that's a great way to just get cheap energy, right? So he's motivated in different ways. But, yeah, it's fascinating.
Now, interestingly, you mentioned SNEC. I know around SNEC, you went to the US from there, and then you went to Intersolar in Europe. You've probably seen as many trade shows, new products, stories from manufacturers as anyone in the last 6 months. What are some of the other takeaways and things that you've seen that have caught your eye?
To be honest, in SNEC, it was very tough to take in the exhibitors. I didn't get a chance to even walk around. Just to get from one meeting to another meeting was a good half an hour. You got over 26 halls there, right? So unfortunately, I wasn't the best planner. So to move from meeting A to meeting B, I was late to every meeting by about 20 minutes. Look, definitely P-type's dead, I believe. I've seen some sort of, you could say, these graphs where they talk about ratios of P-type versus N-type this year, and they're still saying like N-types was like 20%. But in Australia, I think by July, I reckon 80% of the volume will be N-type. I know it's probably a big call, but whoever's bringing in P-type, they're going to be selling at a loss. And the guys who are bringing N-type, you can actually make a bit of money and move a lot of volume. So that's the big shift at the moment. And I have seen some Chinese manufacturers start producing that HJT product. The pricing is a few cents off TopCon, so that they are catching up. And the wattage is, at the moment, not much of a difference, right? It's about the same. My guess is same time next year, there could be another shift from maybe not the 80-20, but I reckon it'll be 30% HJT, 70% TopCon.
So hang on, Rami, is that Trina a TopCon thing, or is that just an N-type? So Trina have got a Vertex S Plus 440 now. Obviously, it's competing with the TopCon from Jinko that's the 440. Is it a TopCon cell, or is it just an N-type that they've got to the same level of efficiency?
No, it's a TopCon N-type cell.
It's crazy, isn't it? I mean, who would have thought that we've picked up another 10% the module?
And you'll see at the end of this year, they'll be comfortably hitting 450 positive tolerance with that TopCon product in the same footprint.
So what's your prediction for the 1 kilowatt panel in a manageable size?
Really?
When? Come on, man. Just throw it out there.
You saw the sizes. I mean, there's these 700 plus panels, right?
They're enormous.
Even 550, that 580, 570, people are stating it's too heavy to manage, and the extra cabling costs. So people are still wanting that 500 watt panel or these new, 480 sized commercial panel rooftop. But in terms of 1 kilowatt, I reckon at least a few years at least. Or otherwise, it's just going to be a lot bigger.
Well, it just comes down to efficiencies, how quick they can build this, get the efficiencies up there. So can they do it within the TopCon and the heterojunction? I know there's perovskite,
maybe a third
stacked
layer,
cells, right? And all these technologies there. Efficiency.
They're working on these 3D sort of solar cells, right? Yep. They're not flat. So that's the only way. That's the only way to get it to the next level. So it's tandem technologies. It's technologies on top of technologies. That's going to get us there.
I mean, utilizing AI to do that would be interesting. I was chatting to my brother, who's a senior IT guy for a US tech company, and he was saying that we don't actually know, or a human didn't do the design of the current microchips. So the parameters are set, and it's been actually designed by AI or computer learning as computers designing microchips for computers, which go generation to generation. So using that same idea, maybe the holy grail of solar panel efficiency isn't going to be created by people per se, but by setting the right parameters within AI. Maybe that's going to give us our 1 kilowatt solar panel within a few years. Who knows?
I'm on ChatGPT now, just asking how to make the best solar panel.
That's how we run the show, basically. We just put the topics into ChatGPT and read off the screen.
And do you guys look at that quality, performance, reliability testing done by RETC? They were known as, I believe, PVEL. Their report comes out every year. So all the big brands went through the different stringent tests, and they've got like a top 8 overall highest achievers. So Astronergy, JA, Jinko, Longji, Q-Cells, Ranergy. They're traditionally a cell manufacturer. So they're like a Tongwei.
Right.
But I think they're ranked number 4. And Trina and Yingli were on there. They were the top 8.
Yeah, right.
So that looked at quality, durability, Thrasher test. Also ran through performance tests as well. So LID, resistance, module efficiency, pan-fire performance, and a high achievement in reliability. So your damp test, PID resistance tests, static dynamic tests, and cycling tests. So that's something probably a bit more relevant when deciding on what panel to pick versus a Bloomberg Tier 1 listing or top shipment listing.
There isn't time for much more, Rami. I think we could continue the conversation for a lot longer, and I'm sure we will in the future. I just want to throw around for any last closing comments or questions or anything. Nige, have you got anything?
Yeah, actually, I said one, but I'm going to drop 2 in. Sorry, mate. But I, especially given Rami's here, I actually want to give a huge shout out to Harry, the Big H, who has worked for Rami since almost the very beginning.
Harry, first employee.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Harry's one of those guys who just beavers away, and he called me the other week. Said, Nige, there's this problem that people who had installed LG solar panels, they're not getting the support they want on warranty. Warranty doesn't happen very often, LG panels, of course, but does happen from time to time. And Harry was on a mission, man, and he went literally banged on the door and banged on tables at LG and actually solved the problem and identified a problem where they had a phone number that was just going nowhere so that people couldn't get support. And it's one of those hidden things that people like Harry, who were sitting there in the background, actually invest time and money. Thanks, Rami, for paying his salary while he did that, to go and solve those problems so that, the dealers and the customers who are out there do get the support they need. So I just want to give a big shout out to Harry for, being so persistent and actually getting that solved.
Actually feel a bit bad because he wanted to run to the office and I stopped him probably a week before he actually went in. Because I said, just give Marcus a call first and just find out who's the right person to speak to.
Yeah.
Right.
And I know Marcus helped out a little bit as well.
Harry, once Harry's got his mind on something, that's right. It. He'll flip tables upside down to make it happen.
That's it, man. And God bless the Harrys of this world and the Harry that
it's a golden rule. Support the products that you sell into the market.
Exactly. Yeah. And sometimes you just got to go and bang on doors and pull on chains and go, mate, your phone number's not working. We need that fixed pronto. And good on you, Harry, for doing that. The other one that I wanted to throw in really, really quickly is I've got a side gig, which is all about electric motorbikes. No surprise there. It's called Moto Electro. There's a website. Go and buy a T-shirt. Fantastic T-shirts. Helps keep the wheels turning. But today, I actually released the very first data set that's ever been released in Australia, accurate data on the registration of electric two-wheelers. Never actually been produced before. Been working with some people and we're building up some databases. The high-level number is there's 6,561 electric two-wheelers registered in Australia. Jump on Moto Electro, have a look if you want to learn more and buy a T-shirt.
That's actually higher than what I would have expected.
Does that include Australia Post?
Yes, it does. Australia Post.
Gold star.
Yeah, good job. Australia Post do have the single largest fleet of electric, they're a three-wheeler actually. They got about 3,500. There's actually more coming. Good on Australia Post. But there's actually some other really interesting surprises in there about the segments and the brands and everything else. So jump on over, buy a T-shirt.
Fantastic. And one of the major things that we haven't mentioned in this episode is that Victoria's announced that there'll be no new gas connections from 2024. Pretty big news. That's going to keep you busy, Karl.
January 2024. So that's it's not even 6 months away, which is fantastic. And it's also driven a massive amount of inquiry for people that use gas and electric hot water services right now to look at heat pumps as well. So we've been absolutely swamped with inquiries this week.
Brings us back to that page we've mentioned on Facebook, the My Efficient Electric Home page, which is just full of great advice, products, and certainly heat pumps and getting off gas and electrifying everything is a big focus there. Well worth checking out if you haven't already. And Rami, thanks so much for coming on today, man. You're You know a whole lot about panels, you know a whole lot about the industry. You're one of the youngest OGs in the industry is the way I put it. Yeah, thanks, mate. Any last comments?
Continue what Karl said, what Victoria's doing with gas. Unfortunately, New South Wales is not following. They made it very clear. So you guys got it good. On Nigel's topic, I feel that with EV chargers, one big lesson learned that we've come across, stick to existing inverter or battery manufacturers who have an EV charger option, because what we've experienced, a pure play EV charging company doesn't have the same infrastructure in terms of after-sales support and tech support that an inverter or battery manufacturer, they already have that in place. So they just piggyback that after-service support when servicing the EV charging products. So there's a quick tip there that we've learned, which we want to share to others as well.
What do they say? Buy once, cry once. Just pay that little bit more, get something reputable that's going to be supported.
And there's lots of good options out there with existing inverter guys out there, right? Your Fronius, your SMAs, and I believe every other inverter manufacturer does have an EV charging option.
Yep. Yeah. So speaking of which, Rami, when you decide to get rid of that Tesla, it's now a rare beast. You can't get any more of them. So I'll stick my hand up to say that I'll be the first one in the queue to buy it.
Raj has already put his hand up. I said no. Harry's selling his, by the way.
Harry's isn't the P100D, mate.
Harry's upgrading to a Model Y, so he's giving up his Model S. So yeah, thanks for your time, guys. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. And I think we'll wrap it up there. So thanks for listening. If you can jump on our socials, LinkedIn, like it, or Facebook, it helps us, and just get the word out to anyone else who might get benefit from it. And we'll catch you next time. Cheers.
Good night.